Thanks for joining, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well and type in where you're at in the world if you are hearing me okay. Uh, and also let us know what you'd like to talk about. So today, this is Talk with Wayne session. Um, I'd like to welcome everybody who's on. Thank you so much for joining. This is Mark here. We're waiting a little bit for Dr. Wayne Dorband. So let's see if he joins in. If not, we're going to show you a very popular on one of our previous webinars from the community, and it's going to be fun. So you're going to enjoy this. So everybody, hello again, and type in where you at, and let us know what you like in our future webinars. So Alicia says hello from Clover, Virginia. Okay. So Alicia moves around a lot. She's traveling a lot. Uh, she is attending our almost every webinar from different places, and so that's good. Let's see. We got okay. So Alicia put in a link. She puts in a lot of information, useful information. People just click and find out more. So here is our secret climate superhero, and some other links here. All right. So looks like we're going to go to our presentation in a second. We'll wait just a few minutes. Wait for Wayne to jump on. If not, we're going to start with our presentation. Once again, thanks everybody. We'd love to have you on. And every week we have like um, some new stuff going on. And this week, Wayne is at a dog event. So he might be in Idaho or some other state. I'm not sure. But he is at a dog event. So he might be busy up there. So in a few minutes, we're going to get started with our presentation here. And this is going to be a fun one. You're going to enjoy this. So here we go. People just loading up in a moment. And okay, so yeah, I'm queuing up this video that we're going to see today. And this is going to be fun. Once again, um, one of our previous replays. If you have seen this before, it's going to be worth watching it one more time. If you haven't seen this before, oh, you're going to be enjoying this. So, all right, so let's go. We're going to get started here.
Webinars we've ever had are ones that start a little rough, and we've done thousands, so that's a good sign.
That's how it goes. That's life, isn't it? Stuff just happens.
Yeah. So it is. What time of the day? But it isn't. Aren't you about 24 hours different? Aren't you? You're close to that at least.
18, I think. If you're running mountain time, we're 18 hours ahead. So I am Thursday morning, just after 10 a.m.
Yeah. Well, we've had.
You guys have 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. over there, isn't it?
It is 4 p.m. here.
4 p.m.
Yeah. We've had the great pleasure of having 3 Kiwis precede you here in the last couple of months, so it's been really cool. And
nice.
we enjoy that. And so I'm excited to hear about what you are doing in terms of using Swedish principles in your life in agriculture in New Zealand. So we'll talk about that as we move ahead here. So Reeves, I think, going to be controlling kind of what everybody sees in the background, and Mark's going to help me with any technical issues, and you and I can just sit and chat. So,
sounds good.
All right. Well, let me ask you this first. Tell us a little bit about sort of your adventure, your journey into what you are doing in life now. So, you know, it's a little bit of your life journey, but it's more about sort of how does it relate to the vocational side of your life.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I've worked in many different sectors throughout my life, but they've always had a common theme from even when I was young. Nature and just the interest of learning, and through that, the vehicle of nature, the interactions, like the ecology, I guess. So that even from a young age, before I even knew what that meant, I think I was just fascinated by it and just the interconnectedness of those type of things. And so I started my sort of career studying environmental science and psychology. That was in New Zealand here. And after that, I sort of got the travel bug, traveled to Australia, to Fiji, Samoa. In Fiji, I was studying some crested iguanas and tuna fisheries management. Had an amazing opportunity to travel to Iceland to study some Arctic char that lived in caves. And when I was 24 years old, that just seemed like an amazing opportunity to travel and to get paid to do something that I really loved. So I jumped at that opportunity. I was in Iceland for a little over a year, met my now partner in Iceland. She's an Icelandic horse trainer. So we lived in a very remote little town in the north of Iceland with 100 people. Loved it, and then from there we moved on to Sweden, which is where we owned a small farm. If you scroll back deep into that Instagram feed, you'll see some of our farming journey, which again was run on those sort of principles of the interaction. So a lot of Joel Salatin type permaculture principles, and just had basically free scope to learn. And from there, we came back to New Zealand, where I'm from the east coast of New Zealand, to Napier. I was actually traveling when I first came back, working on a large infrastructure project for a new motorway to the capital city, and doing stream relocations and restorations to try and rebuild streams they had to move to build the highway. But I wanted to get back to Hawke's Bay, where I'm from, to sort of put back, I guess, to the place that sort of helped raise me. So now I'm back in forestry. That was my opportunity to come back to Hawke's Bay. And I cover an area. I work for a company that manages about 50 to 60,000 hectares of plantation forestry, Pinus radiata. And within those estates, they're typically 300 hectare blocks. Sometimes they're joint. So there's massive scope for large scale land management, which I think for me, having grown up and really thought about what it is that I want to do, it's ultimately land management for good environmental outcomes. And so that's where I'm being led now with the side project of Skogsmark, which is actually Swedish for forest, is to provide really a place for educational content, I guess. And it's not stuff that I'm generating, all these ideas myself, but it's things we're starting to implement in New Zealand forestry. There's examples from all around the world. So the community that we're starting to build there through Instagram and similar channels is just fantastic to hear all the questions and comments and things from people who have similar experiences or similar questions at work. So I'm really enjoying that element of what I do now, as well as my day job that I get to go to the woods almost every day.
Very cool. And as you maybe know, we have a little bit in common in terms of our aquatic interests, and thought that was very cool. A char that lived in caves. So was it a subspecies of
it was
char?
Arctic char. Yep. So it was a dwarf species of char. So the university I was working at there had a program to study genetic diversity and evolution, because the evolution's happening quite fast in Iceland, especially in Arctic char. Ultimately, that wasn't my passion really. The nerd stuff, the fish nerd stuff, I'm into it. I am a fish nerd, well and truly. But I think my space and what I've found for myself, especially working on big projects, is that I love to be the intermediary. I guess it's similar to your university extension programs, where you have someone who takes the really hardcore science and then applies it in the field, or provides it to landowners or guys driving machines. I like that middle space. I like to take in that knowledge, translate it into something usable, and then put it into practice. I love to see the end result. So I'm very fortunate that I get a chance to implement change like that, or restoration, on nearly a daily basis.
Super. Did you, when you were in Sweden, have a chance to ever meet or go visit Richard Perkins' place?
He actually, we didn't actually ever end up meeting, but he actually owned the farm next to our neighbours. Was the mother-in-law, I think. So we used to employ the son of this family. He was driving tractors and ploughing and doing all that sort of thing for us. We purchased our silage and things for pigs from him. His mother lived next door, so we heard all about when they were starting their journey before Richard had his YouTube channel and all those things. But yeah, that's a fascinating project. If you guys haven't checked that out before, yeah, Ridgedale Permaculture, awesome.
Right. So that was Ridgedale Farm that you were near.
Yeah, it was in the same county in Dorband.
Really very cool guy, and has probably done more work with yeoman's plow and really studying yeomans. And he went to Australia to study. So
yeah, he's an incredible teacher. Unfortunately I've never had the chance to meet him, but certainly if and when we go back to Sweden, that's certainly on my list of things to do.
Yeah. So your wife, coming from Iceland, is she a dual citizen, or not your partner? Excuse me, didn't mean to say wife, but
yeah.
But is she a dual citizen in New Zealand and Iceland still?
Yes, so she doesn't have citizenship yet in New Zealand, residency, but yeah, she's from Sweden. So we met in Iceland in this small village, but we moved back. Okay. Yeah, so she's from Sweden. So my two children are born in Sweden as well. So very handy for them. Gets rid of all the paperwork that I had to do to travel to Iceland and Sweden. So yeah, very good. And by virtue of that, I also became a citizen. Much easier process over there than it is here in New Zealand for a Swede to get New Zealand citizenship, unfortunately.
Wow. So outside of the work passion and what you're doing in forestry, and we'll talk more about that, but what are some kind of for fun things you like to do?
They're pretty well interrelated, really. As you'll see in some of these pictures in the feed here, we're just finishing duck season in Hawke's Bay. So it's last weekend, this weekend. And my son, for his 9th birthday, got a single shot shotgun. So he's dead keen on ducks. So a lot of the work I do for wetland restoration in the forest obviously provides very good habitat for waterfowl. So a lot of our weekends are spent actually back in the forest, the same forest that I work in. And there might be hunting for deer or for ducks or doing pest control. So I'm quite fortunate that my kids are really interested in the same way that I am in learning. So what better place to take them than out to the forest? It just happens to be that it's my workplace too. But that gives me a lot of privilege, I guess, to be able to go to forests that are close to town, take my kids, and I can teach them whatever I want. The same things that I'm trying to teach through my posts on Instagram. There's so much out there. There's so many practices that people, once they know that they exist, can apply them on their own properties. They can ask questions. They can continue to learn. I can learn things and meet new people. So, yeah, my pastimes are rivers and streams, really. Fishing, hunting, hiking. It's the same. It's the same stuff. That's why I'm so fortunate to have the job I have.
Yeah. By the way, maybe it's even younger, but in the U.S. you can't get a essentially a permit, a license to shoot a weapon until you're 12. That's the earliest age. And so hunting is not, you can't get a hunting license until you're 12.
Okay.
You say that
Yeah, we have, in terms of the licensing here, it's for waterfowl and game, there is licensing. Deer hunting, there is no license, so it's very different to you guys, but it's more of the firearm safety. So direct supervision of a licensed adult, I guess, is the requirement for a young person. But here in New Zealand, it's a real cultural thing. You start young and you get into it and get out in the bush, and yeah, we are. I don't think we always appreciate how fortunate we are, but having lived overseas in places where the regulations are quite strict for access, let alone tags and all that sort of stuff, we are unbelievably privileged in New Zealand to be able to hunt as freely as we are.
Yeah, and I think I misstated it. You can actually shoot a gun prior to 12, but you can't get a hunting license. So again, I started probably shooting trap and skeet with my dad when I was 7 or 8 probably, but then couldn't get a hunting license, and my birthday's in September, and dove season had already been on for over 3 weeks when I got my license, and I've got do you have anything equivalent to a mourning dove that's a game species there?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have pigeon, obviously. I don't know if we consider that a game bird. It's not the most popular thing to hunt, but I mean, I hunt them. They taste really good. There's much bigger populations than ducks in Hawke's Bay, to be fair. Ring-necked dove, I think, is another species that we have. So they're all considered, they're not really game birds. But we do have quail, pheasant. Those are the two that we manage for primarily. So
Right.
And then a bunch of other native ducks and things as well, but they're not typically hunting for those. The paradise shell duck, I think you just showed a picture there, that's a native duck for New Zealand. So the white-headed duck and the white and black, those are native ducks. So we have a season for those, and as well as the mallard, same species as what you guys have.
We have, yeah. So tell us, I mentioned Richard Perkins, that came from me, but tell us about some people who have influenced you greatly, or one person in the let's just call it broadly, the forestry agriculture space, and who are some people, and tell us a little bit about them.
I think if for the one person that I would consider to have influenced me the most would be, and I'm sure there's many people that would have the same answer to this question, it would be David Attenborough. That's who I grew up with, watching his shows from such a young age and just being absolutely amazed at the things he got to see. And I guess I draw parallels in some ways in terms of while he's not necessarily an expert in any one area of that, he just has the passion for it and the passion to share it as well. And so he would be probably my main influence in terms of what I do, just because he drives that passion for getting involved. And that's, now being a father, probably the big thing that I've found is, why am I doing what I do? It's not for me necessarily, although I love it and I enjoy it. It's not for me. When I look at my children and I come home from work and they ask, what are you doing today? Or what have you done? And when my daughter tells her friends what I do for a job, she thinks that I save the animals that live in the forest, which I'm glad to say some days I do that. But that's probably the inspiration that I take from these people. And Steve Irwin's another one. I don't know if you know him, but he was pretty big in the States. Just the people who develop that passion for what they do and what other people can do, empowering other people. I think those are the people that I take inspiration from, rather than, I mean, Joel Salatin within the permaculture space. People who don't necessarily follow the rules, but they have a mission and they are absolutely determined to see it through and can help to innovate as well, which is one thing in forestry that I think is why I love this space so much. There's people out there with massive amounts of knowledge, machine expertise, and we're able to innovate to get good environmental outcomes that perhaps we weren't managing for before I started in this role. certainly for the company that I work for. But that's what I look for, I guess, for someone. When you ask me who is it that inspires me, or who do I look up to and model myself after, it would be those kind of people, because I bring the passion, I guess, is my biggest skill set. I guess I'm not an expert on a lot of things. I'll have an opinion always, but I think it's my passion and sort of the not wanting to just accept it because that's the way it is.
Cool. By the way, for our audience, I didn't get this in at the front end because we started a little bit on an unorganized mode from my perspective, but please put your questions in the question box. And Mark, if you see things that are relevant as we go through here, go ahead and bring them up as questions. And don't be shy. There's no question there's not a great one. So let's talk about the way we learn a little bit. Tell us about something you've read recently, whether it's a book or maybe it's some internet site or you name it, a magazine, a periodical, whatever, that has had some great influence on you in terms of what your forestry and permaculture life would be.
Yeah, I think the most recent example I can bring up, I do a lot of driving for my job. So podcasts are how I gather my information. And recently I've been listening to, I think the title of that podcast was Habitat U. So I was run by a couple of different universities, I think one out of Iowa State. And they're talking about, I guess, the way we've come full circle in some ways for management, in terms of there was a long period where we sort of felt that nature was something that we shouldn't be manipulating in any way, that it was really to be left to its own devices, as one example, like removing the fire through some forested systems in the US, which now we're starting to understand that the removal of the fire is actually a disturbance to that ecosystem. It might be counterintuitive to think that taking away fire is the disturbance, but I think it's those type of things. And while they don't directly relate to forestry in New Zealand because the ecosystems are so different, we don't have the same disturbance regime. But I think I like to listen to things that are slightly outside of my area of knowledge, and then how can I transition these into what I'm doing? So I know in the States you guys have wildlife foresters, so you're managing forested habitat for deer species, grouse, things like that. And so these are the type of things that I like to listen to primarily, because I don't have a lot of spare time to read, but podcasts and information gathering, and trying to apply those same principles to what we do here, translating them for our species and the habitat and sort of the machines that we have available. And our rotation time too for pine is only sort of 26 to 28 years. So yeah, Habitat U. If you look that up, they've got a whole chain of different podcasts. Amazing content.
Very cool. A couple of New Zealanders I'm curious if you follow at all, people-wise, either Finn McKenzie, I guess it's McKenzie, or Gary Marshall. I know both those guys a little bit.
Those names don't ring a bell for me, sorry.
Yeah, which is kind of cool that even in a much smaller country than the U.S., there are people that we still can get to know. So I actually met both of them at Permaculture Voices 2, which was a conference that if you enjoy podcasts, that's one that you might want to try to listen to, which is Diego Footer. And it's just broadly Permaculture Voices. And I actually am not sure that he's making current episodes anymore, but they are archived and there's hundreds of them.
Yeah,
so.
That's good. It's nice to have a good podcast with a really big backlog or back catalog. Yeah. Good for downloading. Big areas of reception. So downloading podcasts is that's key.
Yeah, very cool. So let's move to tools a little bit. Tell us about some kind of a tool that you've used in the last year or so that you're really excited about, that you'd like to tell others, and you already have. And it can be a physical tool, It could be an internet-related tool. It could be anything you just broadly call a tool.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest tool that I'm beginning to be better at using is myself. You have a lot of ideas, and this is everybody in whatever job that you do. The tool that I guess that I'm trying to be better at using is my voice. So to create a community, to talk about different things, and to educate people, I try and educate people with my knowledge of ecosystems and how things are integrated. I'm trying to convey that to perhaps someone who drives a machine, who may have absolutely no idea about what I'm talking about. But with that tool of it's educating, I guess, teaching, and getting people to understand why you're trying to manage a forest or a wetland or a river in this way. That's been the biggest challenge for me in my role, I guess. I'm primarily a compliance person, so everyone wants to make sure they're following the rules, not doing things that are bad for the environment. But what that puts you in a mindset of is not thinking about, well, what can I do that's good? Not just not doing bad things, but how do we do good things? So it's transitioning, I guess, people's thinking for what shouldn't I do, and rather thinking, what could I do? That's what I'm trying to do, I guess, with this little side project of Skogsmark, and promoting what we're doing, what can be done, how it can be done, demonstrating that it can be done, and trying to generate some excitement around it. Because what I've found is that when you can show people that, hey, we can do this with a machine, you may be doing some short-term disturbance, like in a wetland or something. It doesn't look great when you first do it, let's be honest. But the long-term result, and that's what I'm hoping to present here with the long-term follow-on story of, hey, we do this disturbance here, but in a year's time, it looks like this. It provides habitat for these things, because the guys who actually do the work, they're moving through the forest really quickly. So here in New Zealand, we do, a crew will do about 100 hectares of harvests per year. So the guys who do the work I'm trying to promote don't actually get to see the end result all the time. So it's that communication tool and education tool to try to promote what we can do. You see the beginning, the middle, and then the end, the result.
Well, that's a good transition into broadly and even more specifically just telling us anything and everything you want to about your Skogsmark project and how you got the zeal, the idea to take something that you had learned in Sweden and to apply it in New Zealand. And before we do that, though, Mark, are there any questions that might be relevant for right now?
Looking at
No,
and this is Mark. I should.
Yes.
This is Mark from Bangladesh. So.
Yes. Yeah, that's fine, because both of us have a cool first name. All right. So let's see. I'm looking at the question, and okay. So, oh no, not really any questions from the audience. So we have someone from New Zealand. Yeah, that's cool. And there's Robert Hayes. He's a longtime regular. So he says, Mark, thank you for speaking with us today. Did you participate in the REKO circle when you were in Sweden? I wonder what you'd say about your enterprise, or excuse me, about your experience with how well
No,
it might.
I'm actually not familiar with the REKO or REKO that he's mentioning there, so I don't think so. Would be my answer.
Robert comes up with some cool but sometimes obscure groups, and it's always nice because he's not shy, and he'll make sure we understand it. So who's there from? Is Kate on from New Zealand? She's one of our regulars. Who's Kate?
It's not Kate. It's Faye. Faye Christie.
Faye Christie. Yep, Faye Christie's also one of our regulars from New Zealand, who's done some really cool things with her rather mountainous property, actually. So anyway, let's let Mark now talk about Skogs Mark and the project in general. Arib can be showing some images of it in the background and images of things that Mark's doing, and just take whatever amount of time here. We're about halfway through our allotted time, but take as much time as you want and just kind of tell us about it, Mark.
Yeah, so I think that the initial idea, I guess, for me was just to start something. I work quite long hours at my day job in forestry, doing the stuff that I love, doing restoration, protecting waterways, areas of native vegetation. I do a lot of bat surveys, kiwi surveys, amazing type work that, you know, a lot of people volunteer huge amounts of time to even participate in. So one of the initial drives for me to start this whole like a website and Instagram and things, it's a lot of work, you know, to do that on the side. But I decided this year that I would just make a change to do more, I guess. One thing that I found with listening to podcasts, especially for motivational people, if you haven't checked them out, Kiki K is a good one. She's from Sweden, and also Spoonful of Sarah. So there's those motivational people who make you sort of think, when you got time, to what is it that you want to do? What's your mission? What are you doing each day to assist you to achieve your goal? And I realized that I was working really hard, really long hours, to try and achieve a goal. But when I stepped back, I realized that the scale at which I was working, even though we're managing 50 to 60,000 hectares, and I'm working with a team of 20 to 30 people, plus hundreds of contractors, the scale of what I was doing in terms of what is needed, if we want to just throw in like a climate change, something like that, the scale needs to be much bigger. So you need to affect more people. So you need to grow an audience, essentially, because you want to tell the story, right? So that's how it started. And I mean, yeah, you start like anybody. I'll get a website. Okay, what should I call it? Hey, let's call it something. I called it Skogs Mark because it's forest. It means forest, right? Woodland. And my name's Mark. It fit. Okay, that's where the name came from. It has a nice Swedish connection. Almost half of my followers are from Sweden, back from when we were doing farming and things like that. That's where it originated. But the idea behind it was, I guess, just to do more and to do more good. So I wanted to present what I was doing, and it's not what I'm doing necessarily, but what we are doing as forestry in New Zealand, what contractors are doing, some of the good work that people are doing. If you're in a machine and you do a fantastic job, I mean, I'm going to come and take some cool drone footage of it, and I'm going to share it because I think that's amazing. You know, it's my way of sort of saying thank you for listening to me talking about fish and birds and plants and all the rest of it, which might not have been on, you know, in any way of interest to you, but you've listened, you've done something, and I want to, I guess, let them know that there's a lot of people out there who think that stuff is really cool. So that, I guess, that was the driver. And then for me, once I'm in it and I'm meeting a lot of people, I have a lot of great conversations, people from BC, even in Scandinavia, Finland, Norway, all in forestry, all doing a different range of jobs, different backgrounds, different experience, and different questions, I guess. So when we start having a conversation, I'm learning things too, you know, which I think, hey, that's a really cool thing. I'm going to try that out in the forest here somewhere. So for me, that's how it's morphed, I guess, that I actually, even though while I'm educating people, I'm actually educating myself just through the building of relationships, which is quite fitting, I guess, because that's ultimately what the goal of this is. So while I educate myself, I'm hoping to be able to educate other people, or at least present, hey, if you want to try this stuff, it's possible. This is how we did it. So that, I guess, yeah, briefly, that's what it is, and that's how far it's got to this point. So I guess my core drive of the project is just to add value. You know, I'm doing a lot of work, people are doing a lot of work, and it's good stuff, but at the moment we're not really telling that story. So that's the number one aim of it, is to add value to people who may have an interest in it.
So it's a wonderful attitude to have, an approach to take. So just so those that don't really maybe even understand what it means that you're doing. Give us a basic description. Just assume that the audience has very little knowledge of what it is that you're doing that would be different than let's say some different approach to the management of a system like you would be doing. So just give us, you know, a basic description.
Okay, I guess to put it into like a real practical example of what I think I do and what the company I work for does that's different. We recently had to put in a river crossing or a culvert for a forest road, and we have a lot of rules and regulations that we need to follow to make sure that we're doing that in the most environmentally sort of appropriate way. And I have no problem with following rules when I can see the outcome is going to be environmentally beneficial. But what I like to get our guys to think about is, well, while we have these rules and regulations in place, what is the ultimate outcome? What are we trying to achieve by following these rules? So in this instance, we actually didn't follow the rules. We had all the relevant permissions and things to do this, but we didn't follow the standard thinking on it because we actually wanted to try and do some restoration in conjunction with putting this pipe in. So what we did, instead of lowering a pipe beneath the stream bed, which is sort of the typical approach, we actually raised it. So really the complete opposite thinking. But the idea behind that was we wanted to restore a wetland that was on the upstream end of a pipe. So we took the extra time to plan and go through the regulatory process to actually get permission to do something that really was against the rules. But this is the core component, I guess, of how I think that we need to start managing our land is what can we do within the scope of our business to enhance the environment in which we're working. It's not just how do we tick the boxes, you know, because a lot of these regulations are put in place very well-meaning, you know, they have the right intention, but when you put them into practice, they're restrictive. So that's where people like me, I think, and I'd encourage any ecologist or biologist that has an interest in land management at scale to get into forestry, because you're able to put a different thinking cap on in terms of how we're doing environmental management, not just following rules, but providing examples of when those rules are actually not appropriate. So the wetland restoration stuff with increasing a pipe height would be like a physical example, and there are some posts I think on that site, but I'm planning on making a few videos about it to demonstrate it, because I think it's a really good example where if we follow the rules, we're actually doing a disservice to the environment in which we're operating. So I guess that's like in the crux of it. That's what I do, is I try to think about it differently. I'm not a forester by training. So what I bring to forestry, I think, is someone who's just outside the box. You know, I might throw in questions that are that don't get asked.
To simplify the description that you just gave, and again, I've overseen a lot of projects myself involving, you know, dealing with taking a aquatic system and modifying it by roads and having to manage what the system does. But to really simplify it, instead of keeping the course of the river / stream, the waterway that you're getting under the road, you really, by raising the culvert height, you created both a dam that would back up more water, create more of a aquatic system, wetland system upstream, and then allow the water to flow through the culvert downstream. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly right. So the wetland on the upstream side of that example was experiencing erosion from a historic crossing that had been put in. So there were two things. One, the erosion on the upstream was not good for the wetland. So the hydrology was altered and it was no longer really wet on the downstream end. And the other side of that was that the outfall of the pipe was about a 2-meter drop to the stream. So it was preventing fish from accessing the wetland. So you have a lot of habitat potentially, but it's degraded, and you've got no access for the fish that could utilize it. So we did two things in that project really, which I forgot to mention first. the one was to restore the wetland, so to restore the hydrology, so the soil is flooded. We're not really looking to make a pond, but we want to reflood the soil to get the wetland plants re-established, and there is some open water habitat there. But the other part of that was reinstating and installing a fish passage structure to allow, it was eels in this case, so the eels could climb up and into the wetland. So it's things like that, I think, and that's my real passion. That's the fish nerd stuff. That's yeah, that's what I live for, I guess.
Cool. So you started out by saying that the reality is you, to a certain extent, violated what would be traditionally thought of as being the rules. So did you have to ultimately ask for forgiveness, or did you convince whoever was putting the regulations in place? In the U.S., it would be either a state fish and game agency or a federal agency, probably Department of Interior here if it was federal, and if it was state, it could be whatever each state has as their own fish and game agency.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you handle it? Again, do it and then go in and say, oh, it's done. Can we get forgiveness for this now? Or did you just say, you know what, we're not going to use the standard approach. We're going to use something that's different, and we really expect we're going to convince you that it's the right way, and you're going to give us permission?
Yeah, it was definitely the second approach. We've had a few instances where I guess as forestry and as we start to do this new, more innovative stuff, a lot of the councils, is what we call them here, that have it'd be like a state government, I think would be the equivalent in the US. So I really want to involve them in it because they have a lot of specialized people too, who I draw on knowledge of what lives where, ecosystem types, a lot of GIS data and things, people who are as passionate as I am about that stuff. So I engage with the councils because I want other people to do it. You know, I want other forest companies to do what we're doing. And in order to do that, you have to get the regulators on board. So for that example of the wetland restoration, we had the council, a couple of representatives came out, we went over the site, I discussed what we wanted to do, talked about what the existing site parameters were, and they with them were able to give us a legal document that deemed it to be a permitted activity, which meant we were able to undertake the work because we'd convinced them that ultimately the environmental outcome was going to be good. And I think that's probably my biggest takeaway for what I do now, is to put in place things that are not only are they good for the environment, but they're practical enough and cost effective enough that they're going to be uptaken on a big scale. It's fine to do bespoke fixes, spending a little bit of extra money here and there, but if you really want to make change over, as I say, 50 or 60,000 hectares, you need to change the way things are done. That needs to happen primarily by cost, right? So you need to drive it from, it has to be cost effective, time efficient, and it has to be not too far outside your business model. You know, forestry in New Zealand at least is an investment industry. It's a relatively short rotation crop, so people are not necessarily managing for the same values as you would in a country like Sweden or Norway, where your rotation cycle might be 120 years, you know? So that's the challenge for me, is to build this kind of thinking into what is essentially a reasonably short timescale thinking. So driving a harvest regime that we can replicate rotation after rotation that gives us environmental protection.
Super. That's really cool. Do you have, we talked char earlier, and just so everybody understands, because maybe they've never heard that word, but just think of a trout or a salmon. They're in the same type of fish, the same family. And do you, what salmonids do you have in New Zealand that are either inland or anadromous? Do you have salmon or a trout species that would be similar to what we have here in the States?
Yeah, primarily rainbow trout and brown trout. We do have salmon in a few of our South Island, predominantly rivers. Not huge fisheries for salmon, but for rainbow and brown trout, very big recreational activity, and we do have game councils that manage for those species. There were reintroductions, I think, with acclimatization societies in the earlier days. That sort of release of trout doesn't occur, I think, on such a large scale anymore. The populations are self-sustaining in certain areas, and certainly it's a big revenue generating part of the economy, I guess, and for New Zealand people, hunting and fishing, it's a part of life. It really is, even though they're not native species here. So they are introduced. So there's some conflict,
Would the eel that you described, that your system design that moved the culvert up rather than down and allowed migration movement for that eel, would it be a prey of a trout, of either a brown or a rainbow trout?
When they're small, I would say the trout has the upper hand. Yeah, getting larger, the eel would certainly predate upon trout. I think historically it was believed that it was like the end of trout were going to be the eels, and the eels were persecuted for that. Similar to a lot of our birds, shags, I think, were nearly exterminated because the fear was that they were going to eat all the trout. I think that thankfully that sort of science has sort of been disproven. The native trout are the introduced trout are much more of a threat to the native species than vice versa.
Okay, yeah. As you probably realize, and maybe not, we don't have as many eel that are either invasive or that are indigenous. So that they're just not. That's not a species we would have much experience with.
Mm-hmm. You have lamprey over there too.
Yeah, lampreys would be an example in the Great Lake region, but they're not going to be found. They're pretty, like, we don't see anything like that in the Western United States. Anything equivalent to a lamprey.
We're fortunate here, I guess, in terms of for a lot of our infrastructure that does have problems for fish restricting passage. A lot of because we live in a relatively mountainous country with steep rivers, a lot of our fish can climb pretty well, actually, which makes a lot of our culvert, a lot of the retrofit stuff that you'll see on my account there, it's designed for climbing species. So they give us a really good out for fixing fish passage. You don't have to build like the salmon fish passes like you guys might have to. Much more expensive, bigger land area, much more technical. So we are sort of fortunate in that way, but fish passage barriers in New Zealand are a massive problem for our freshwater fish.
So far we've talked about fish, and we've talked about waterfowl, we've talked about other game birds. I don't know that I've ever asked one of our New Zealand species this question, or New Zealand speakers, excuse me. What would be considered the keystone type of terrestrial predators that are either indigenous or introduced other than man? So example, in the northern North American, it would be grizzlies that would probably be at the top of that. So brown bears, we don't, they've become almost extinct in a lot of North America. So brown bears sit in that position. Although, yeah, I would put them. Mountain lions have become close in terms of their position. But what would be your highest or higher level keystone predators?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, they're introduced. And that's the reality for us at the moment. We have a massive program, Predator-Free 2050, in which we're trying to, by 2050, to remove rats, stoats, possums, and feral cats as well. The New Zealand, in its evolutionary history, was populated by birds and ground-dwelling birds. The kiwi, the national bird, it can't fly. Yeah. So we don't have any large land predators. We have birds essentially. We had a few eagles that extinct now, but those were the large land predators. The problem we have now is that we've introduced a lot of stuff that really just goes to town on our native species because they aren't adapted to have this predation pressure. So yeah, our main species are ones we're actually trying to get rid of. We're trying very hard. So a lot of the project that you had before on the screen with the fundraising that I'm doing is for predator control. It's within an area of native forest. It's outside the bounds of what this forest company is going to do for its typical operations. But New Zealanders are really getting in behind this movement of having individual traps at your house, traps in land that you own, running volunteer trap lines and things like that, because we're really driving to try and get rid of these pest species because they're so bad for our native fauna.
And do you have native ruminants, deer, elk, something of that nature?
No, introduced again.
Everything's been introduced. Yeah.
Everything's been introduced. Well, that's
we raise alpacas. We raise alpacas, and obviously they're domesticated here, but they were native and wild in South America and the Andes, and they've actually been introduced domestically in New Zealand. I wonder if never really asked anybody if they've become wild anywhere.
No, I don't think they're wild here. I'm not sure. They're typically sort of pets, I think, aren't they? I think they're good for fiber, but yeah, no, they're domesticated species. I haven't come across wild alpaca herds in the bush.
I would think that's correct, although they could be probably in some of those mountainous areas.
Yeah.
So when you back to the predators again, your major problem are you mentioned some opossums. So there are lots of large rodents that are the big problems.
Yeah. Right? So the brush-tailed possum, which was introduced for fur trade. So that's a big problem they predate on bird eggs, nestlings. They eat the foliage of native trees, so they're quite a big pest. And then rats obviously are a massive issue for the same reasons, and stoats as well. So just direct predation really. That's the main issue, is direct predation on particularly our native birds and ground nesting and ground dwelling birds.
Yeah. Mark, do you have any other questions from the audience? Mark B.
Not really questions. I have a couple of comments from Faye. She's from Nelson, New Zealand. She says she has black trouts in her pond and also alpacas. So that's
okay. Yeah, I knew she had alpacas. And black trout. I wouldn't know. What would that be, Mark? What would that be equivalent to for us?
I'm not sure. She might be referring to the native trout, so a giant cockapoo, perhaps.
Okay.
Black trout, I'm not exactly sure, but rainbow and brown are the species that I know that we have. But we do have something that's referred to as a native trout, which grows to a similar sort of size. But that's actually,
we have fish in the south here, southern United States, that are actually in saltwater areas that they call sea trout, and they're not salmonids. They're not at all related. And the way you can actually distinguish what a salmonid would be with its the fin it has on the very it's a dorsal fin that is not spined, and only salmonids have that, and they have it back near the pectoral fins, and all those species that you described would have that. We're getting somewhat close to the end. I want to make sure we end by letting you just say anything you'd like to give us, but I thought of one other quick question related to forestry. What about species that are dangerous now in terms of the fact that they're taking over in the forested areas, plants? What are some of the really bad species that you might be trying to get rid of?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really a plant expert, but there are a
Okay.
number of species in Hawke's Bay that we are obligated to manage, actually. So that's controlled by the council. They have a list of pest species. That's primarily silvicultural guys who are looking after that, and we often get funding to
Okay.
do weed control. Pampas grass is a big one. Blackberry obviously is associated with forestry, although that's associated with roadsides and all kinds of other things too. So I would say that in Hawke's Bay we're relatively fortunate that we don't have any. Well, I mean they are widespread, but they're not probably causing the ecological degradation that of some plants that perhaps you have in the States that are really altering habitats.
Right. Right.
And that's not really it's not part of my core role. I'm not really a plant guy. I have to admit.
Okay.
I'm more
Well, that's fair statement. Well, let's take the last few minutes here to just let you give us anything in summary that you'd like, and tell us. And I'm sure that, again, I'm not able to see it because I was able to only get in on the phone here, but Reeve's probably been showing how to contact you. But maybe give everybody the right way, the best way to get in touch with you if they've got questions, comments, and so on, and just give a summary for us here to end.
Yeah, I think certainly if anyone wants to get in touch, I mean, by all means, I would love to hear where everyone's come from today to watch this and what areas you're working in. The best place at the moment would be through Instagram, so to just follow me there, DM me in there. My email and everything is through my website, so skogsmark.com. I think Reeve will have it on the screen now. So if you have any kind of questions, whether you're from within New Zealand and you just want a bit of advice or anything like that, or from overseas and you're interested in anything we've talked about or how we do forestry, or if you just want to make a connection, I would really love to connect with anybody who's working in a similar area. It's really great for me to learn too. So by all means, please contact me. And in terms of a summary, I guess my advice to anybody who is interested in this kind of thing, I would definitely recommend starting whether it's an Instagram account or a Facebook page or a website, to just generate your network for yourself. Get your core area about what you want to educate people on or be educated on yourself, and start something. You don't have to be great to start something, but you have to start something to be great, right? So I think that's a real lesson that I've taken for myself this year, is that really you just got to start. You might think that you always need to wait until you're an expert in something before anyone wants to know about it or anything like that. But I think now, really, with the decade of restoration being launched, I think people who have an interest in this stuff, really, we need to start taking action. The time for talking and thinking it would be nice and all the rest of it, we really need to start moving. And I know there's a lot of people out there who would feel the same way. So I would just say, just to think about what your mission is, and to do one thing each day, one thing towards achieving that mission. That's what I'm doing for this year for myself. And so far it's really clarified what I'm doing, both in my job and personally.
What a great bit of advice. That's awesome. Mark or Reeve, do you have any questions for Mark?
Oh, it's really great. Great to have you here, and awesome things you're doing. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I don't have any, I think, questions, but yeah, one thing I will ask, like, is there anything we can help you with, like, through the community, or we have, like, some people from New Zealand, so anything you want us to help you with? That's the question, how we can help you and be a network there.
Yeah, I think definitely connect and let me know you're from New Zealand. I travel the country fairly regularly, so anyone that wants to connect in person too, DM me, and I'd love to meet up. That would be fantastic.
That's a great. I'm glad you did that, Reeve. We usually make sure we remember to do that because we want to help you out, and if we can, and then if you can help any of our community, that would be awesome too. So I've got right now at the top of the hour, and we sure appreciated this, Mark. It's been awesome. We'll make sure we send to you some of our other New Zealand connections so that if you'll have them, and then they're going to be able to watch your replay. For everybody
Yeah,
that's online, you know that the replay will be up in a couple of days, and you'll be able to watch it. So that'd be awesome. And shoot, we might, if we could, we'd love to maybe ask you to come on again at another time. And please know that if you're ever in the States, if you're ever here in the middle part of the country, in the mountains area of Rocky Mountain National Park, please come and visit me.
100%. You will just have to wait for this whole pandemic thing to die down a bit and get some air traffic back in the air.
Yeah. I know, and you guys have been very fortunate and had a lot less incidents than we have. But
unbelievably fortunate.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, hey, thanks, Mark, and thanks to the audience. And we have one real quick.
All right, so this was a replay. So everybody who stayed around until the end, thank you so much. Also visit our website, Eat Community, for more webinars,